Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my plan for League Start, which is a Berserker Slammer. Now, I have made some trees all the way from level 12 up to 94 with one little cluster set up here for permanent onslaught and some armor and stuff. But I want to preface this all, give you a little bit of a warning, which is I have not played the newly modified buffed melee skills. I don't have the new Berserker. I can't test these things. I don't know if this is going to work or not. If you know me or if you've been following my builds for a while, you know I'm not a big fan of making a character in PoB before making it in game. I don't like to pre-plan items. I don't like to do that stuff. A lot of times, if I can test it or I can do something like set up a character in game and actually have something that's working and operational, then I'll import it into PoB and I'll share it that way. But I'm not a big fan of knowing before playing whether or not it's going to deal damage, whether or not it's going to be good, that sort of stuff. I like the excitement of not knowing. For me, that's fun. That is an enjoyable thing. If I knew, for example, that this build was going to deal 10 billion damage and was going to have infinite HP and it was never going to die, and I knew that was the answer going into it, or whatever, it would be not super exciting for me because I'd rather not know. I'm not probably explaining this well, but the point is, I'm not guaranteeing this build is going to be good, so play at your own risk, okay? You have been warned. Generically, the idea I'm going to go for, probably my approach is going to be, I'm thinking about doing blood magic because caring about mana, omega lol, and I'm going to do probably a petrified blood setup and do 2 automated war cries. That can be done with about 20% reservation efficiency mastery, champion of the cause, and then likely I will need either something like an anoint for 12% reservation efficiency here, or I will need Enlighten, or I will need a Helmet Corruption with less cost multiplier. I'm going to need something to make my reservation just a little bit more efficient. And the reason for that is with Petrified Blood, I don't know if it's super well known, but it's semi well known. Basically, if you're above the half-life reservation, if you have a little bit unreserved above half-life, you effectively can get Overleech, which would make a cluster like this, Hemotophagy, whatever this thing's called, a lot better, where you have Overleech because it's trying to fill your life, but it gets stopped right at the halfway point. So the idea is, in order to get that reservation amount, I need a little bit more than just this wheel. Initially, I will have to start out with probably Blood Magic, 1 automated Warcry, and Petrified Blood, and that will fit within this reservation amount. But eventually that's what I want to do. I want to automate 2 Warcries and then have probably 1 self-cast Warcry. I'm thinking Seismic. Whenever I do that Warcry, I'll have like 14 exerts. If I get the special mace, it'll go all the way up to 18. So it should be pretty high quality life. I want to have the feeling of a guy who gets to slam with very powerful slams that has the exerts for the more AoE, the double damage, but I don't want to have the feeling of pressing piano and having to worry about it, having to think. I just want to jump around and I want to hit things. So that's the idea. That's the plan I'm going to go with. And then we'll have Eternal Blessing for probably Determination if we want to go tank. If we want to go more ZHP and go more into offense, we probably go Pride. But that's going to be my initial approach. There is, on top of that, late game options. For example, I'll show you, we set up a buy list for the character. This is not like super well done, but it should be good enough to give you an idea of what items to go for or try to acquire. For example, late game, I could see myself doing something like Calm's Heart with Grand Spectrum, Minimum Endurance Charge, Eternal Damnation. Side note, this is just like a thing I'm just hoping they adjust for. Please do not let Eternal Damnation be additive damage reduction with endurance charges, because basically it's going to be an auto include in every single build for 90 DR. It's way too strong if it's additive. Hopefully they're separate multipliers, because if it's additive, it's just going to be a little bit disgusting to say the least. But yeah, anyways, Eternal Damnation, Grand Spectrum, Endurance Charge scaling, or doing Ralakesh, both of these will work. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's the sort of idea I'm probably going to go with in sort of the later game. Early game, I'm not really bothering with doing Endurance Charges. I'm playing this character, basically just have some good damage and see how it goes. I'd like to see if this character can go straight into Sanctum. I know the requirements of Sanctum and the damage is quite high. I see that melee got buffed quite a bit. Maybe if we get a good Physaxe, it might be doable. I'm not planning on it. I might just go in there, YOLO, see how it goes. But that is the idea. We're going to go for hopefully some decent DPS slams. Now, I want to go into one thing or some of the reasoning behind Berserker, which I've seen a lot of people say Berserker is bad or Berserker isn't good. And I want to go through my argument for why I believe it is good. Number one is, okay, so Aspect of Carnage, we all know this is a node that does a lot of damage. Increased damage taken makes you less tanky. Counteracting that's going to be things like Eternal Damnation, Endurance Charges. Early on, I'm not going to have that. I'm okay with that. I'm playing soft core. I'm just trying to kill some things and have fun. But beside from that, if you look at this wheel here specifically, this is the biggest, well, one of the biggest changes that happened to Berserker. Obviously Warbringer, but I'll go into that next. Crave the Slaughter, Rite of the Ruin. If you know old Crave the Slaughter, Rite of the Ruin, the first node was 10 rage, and it was 1 rage point every 0.03 seconds or something. It had a 0.03 second cooldown. If you played with that, that rage generation was not good. It was basically, this node was mostly a dead node, and then you had the triple rage node, which then helps carry the entire like wheel here. Whereas now it's quite a different situation. Rage gives you 1% more damage per stack. It starts at 30 maximum and can go up to 60 from the tree and a bit more depending on stuff that you can get on items that have max rage, for example. But the idea is, with our tree here, I think we have about 55 rage, and then we can anoint another +5 if we go for berserking. But the idea is, if you have this node plus Rite of Ruin at 55 rage, you're looking at close to 80% attack speed from this one singular node. This is, of course, assuming that the every rage grants 1% increase attack speed is scaled by rage effect. I believe it is, based on the wording. The rage is granting it. Therefore, I feel like it would get affected by rage effect. This is a, I don't know, I'm like 70-30 on it. 70% says the attack speed will get affected. We will see. But the idea is you're getting a bunch of attack speed from this node, much more than you get anywhere else, which is a bunch of damage. This node, 50% rage effect at 55 rage, is about 26% more damage on top of 26% attack speed, on top of 26% armor, on top of movement speed if we get the anoint or the extra thing for movement speed like the mastery here. But the idea is it's scaling a lot of those stats. We're going to have Overleech, which should easily sustain the lose life part of this. And then on top of that, we can click Berserk with very high uptime. Berserk gives another 60% rage effect, which will give us more attack speed, and then it'll give us more damage from our rage. Now, I want to say this because I think it's something that, I think it's like the subtle difference in rage that I don't think people are really quite realizing, which is how much rage gen we have now versus how much rage gen we used to have, in terms of like, you were forced into uniques that generated rage. Now, rage gen is like crazy good. You get a master that says 2 rage on hit, 1 rage on hit for a node here. The 2 small nodes in this ascendancy are giving rage on hit. Throughout my tree, grabbing the rage wheels, I think I have like 11 rage, 10 rage on hit, something like that. And that can be generated every 0.5 seconds. If you looked at the old mastery, the old Berserker, it was 1 rage every 0.3 seconds versus now 10 rage every 0.5 seconds. We get to 55 rage in 2 seconds, basically. That's how fast we're getting there. And that's also a situation where I click Berserk, it is going to last a long time when I'm fighting a boss where I am just capping out at max Berserk constantly. So the idea here is, normally Berserk used to be a thing where, yeah, throughout the map you generate rage, and then you have like a 2-second burst window where you have Berserk up. The current Berserk and the current Berserker, and if you invest in the rage, you probably click that, you turn on Berserk at the first monster you run into in a map, and if you keep fighting throughout the map, it's going to last maybe through the entire map. That sort of style of extra rage gen. We'll see how it plays out, but I'm very excited about it, to say the least. I also am doing a situation where I have Warcries granting me rage. This is I don't know if it's going to work or not. I have tested various Warcry masteries and various Warcry things in game. For example, this thing says when you Warcry. I tested this with automated Warcries, and currently that generates Onslaught. I tested Warning Call with automated Warcries. Currently this generates the armor with the automated Warcries. An example of something that I'm pretty sure does not work with automated Warcries is 15% increased damage for each time you've Warcried. Apparently when you versus you've is different. Also, the 15% life when you use a Warcry, this is also not triggered during an auto Warcry. There's like some very hit or miss masteries that some work with autos, some work with doesn't. But the way this is worded, I believe it'll probably work with the Warcries being the Warcries that I've automated. So we'll have rage gen constantly happening from our automated Warcries, which will stop us from ever having rage go down. Basically, the way the new rage works is if you have a couple seconds of downtime, it goes to 0. And so the idea is with our auto Warcries, we'll just constantly be capped off on rage, even during boss immunity phases. I'm also planning to use a mastery that says gain 5 Valor when you Warcry if able. This is the idea of, I want very high uptime on my banner. The banner is like 24% more damage. By the way, my old video where I was talking about the slam meta, I completely read the patch notes wrong. My brain and reading in Path of Exile, it's not really that great. Essentially, I read 4% more, and then I just looked down to the lower text and it said scaling up to 19, and I read that as 4% more melee fizz scaling up to 19. But in between, there was a little part that said mana 13 scaling up to 19, and I hovered over that. Point is, Warbanner is still insanely good, 24% more damage if you can have good uptime on it these last like 10 seconds at base. So the idea is, throughout the map, I'm going to be generating this Valor, and I can pop it on any hard pack I run into, or during the boss immunity phase, the gain 5 Valor during War Cries or the automated War Cries, that'll generate me the 50 max Valor very quickly during most boss downtimes, and I'll have very high uptime on my banner. And then on top of that, whenever I pop the banner, 3 Frenzy, 3 Endurance. I think this is pretty good. You could probably also do this wheel just to make the banner do more damage, but I think this is good early on because I don't have currently a way to generate Endurance or Frenzy initially, so I like this a little bit more. Another thing I'm not sure is going to work out or pan out, but I'm going to test, is I'm going to try out doing an Impaler with just the Harpooning Wheel and the effective impales of non-impaled enemies recently. The idea here is, I don't really want to invest that much into Impale. I don't want to go into a bunch of small hittings, scaling up a bunch of Impales that just go over a duration or whatever. I'd like it just to be where I hit the enemy hard with a double damage slam. There's about a 30% chance I Impale, so I'm just slamming a few times. I'll hit that 30% chance. It will go straight to 5 Impales, and all the Impales will all be Giga Impales. And then the next 5 hits I hit the enemy are just massive Impale hits chunked on top of my extra damage. That's the thought process behind it. I haven't tested this. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to try it out. The earlier trees do not have it, but that's the thought process behind there in case you are wondering. Outside of all that, this is the tree setup. I don't have too much thoughts other than I'm just going to grab a 2-hand axe. I'm going to start slamming. And then in the late game, I would like to swap to possibly either a propagator mace and lean into the gain 50% Ellie as extra, and then lean into maybe a more elemental setup instead of a fizz overwhelm setup or fizz ignore fizz mitigation setup. Or I'd like to go into eventuality rod. It's a staff that has +1 endurance charge, and lean in more into those endurance charges in that mitigation layer and maybe go crit. But we haven't seen the staff enchant yet. We know that the mace enchant is gain 50% of each element, which is crazy. We'll see what the staff enchant is. If the staff enchant's good, that could be an option as well. So I have some ideas. I am going to be making basically a daily progression update on this character. That's what I usually do on League starts. Maybe one day I'll do a video on the League mechanic, and then the next day I'll do a video on more updates of the character. That's usually how I like to do these League starters. So if you want to follow along, you can hopefully have fun with it. I'm just going to see where it's at, see where it goes. And it's just not something where I want to make it all ahead of time and know 100% how it's going to work. I'll be doing some test runs, some leveling runs, stuff like that. But I can't really showcase a test run of what this character will be because the character is going to be entirely different based on the melee changes, based on Berserker changing. So mostly it's just going to be me getting familiar with melee initial starts because it's something I am quite bad at and I want to get a bit better at. So anyways, that's probably what we'll be doing over the next few days besides theory crafting some other things. This will be the starter I'm going to go with, and hopefully you guys have some fun on League Start. Yeah, I'll share the POV below. It is not a guide. Follow at your own risk. Enjoy. Take care, Exiles, and peace out.